There is this sensation when you realize you are in a dream. You don't want to wake up, yet you know you inevitably will. And right now, Victor was trapped in such a dream. He wandered the streets of a desolate city in his sleep, aware he was dreaming, but utterly unable to awaken. Victor had squeezed his eyes shut several times, pinched his arm, but the slumber refused to release him. How long will this go on? Or am I not asleep at all? He thought. In such situations, people start talking to themselves, but Victor couldn't utter a single word, even though this was his own dream. He sat down on a chair outside a very familiar cafe and started pondering what had happened to him. Victor knew something had occurred the day before, but his consciousness seemed to block the memories, as if recalling them would cause him great distress. Deep in thought, the man didn't notice an unfamiliar blonde-haired girl settling next to him. She looked like an angel who had just descended from the heavens, and Victor felt a sudden ease in his breathing. All his senses seemed to be restored. He could hear better, feel more keenly, and think clearer. But most importantly, Victor realized he could speak again. Without hesitation, he asked the stranger, "Who are you?" The man didn't recognize his own voice. The girl laughed like a silver bell. She looked at him the way one looks at small children. "Don't say anything. Don't waste your strength. Come with me. I will take you to where you will remember everything. Almost everything." He decided not to reply to the mysterious stranger. She took his arm and led him toward the city limits. Step by step, the high-rise buildings vanished from their sight. Victor began to notice a steep precipice on the horizon, its bottom invisible. "Where are we? Am I dead?" he finally asked. "Not yet, but that is for you to decide. I won't tell you that everything here happens like in the movies, that you will see a light at the end of the tunnel and wake up. That is not how it happens in real life. You must figure out how to find the exit yourself," the girl said calmly. "Can't I stay here?" Victor asked. "Sooner or later, you will descend into that abyss. Only then, you will no longer have a choice. Come on, go." "They are already waiting for you there," the stranger said with a smile. And Victor resolved himself. Now he remembered what had happened. He remembered nearly dying. Or perhaps he had died. That remained to be seen. Just take one step and see what happens next. Yes, that's what he would do. And Victor stepped forward, feeling his body relax, his eyes close, and him sinking back into sleep. Unknown again. The man's eyes began to flutter, but he still hesitated to open them. Last time, Victor had been stronger. When he first found himself in the dream, he had opened his eyes without a second thought. Now, doing so felt much more terrifying. But he knew he had pulled through. It was a coma. His body ached terribly, his head throbbed, and he was desperately thirsty. Somewhere in the distance, he heard the beep of a pulse monitor. With fear, the man finally opened his eyes and looked around, though doing so was initially nearly impossible. Victor was in the city's central hospital. The most elite doctors were treating him. Money allows for a lot, and he recalled how he ended up here. Victor was a millionaire, almost a billionaire, who had bought and resold cryptocurrency at the right time. From that success, he opened other businesses, cafes, restaurants, supermarket and retail chains, and 2 residential development companies. Furthermore, Victor owned 2 5-room apartments in his city, a house outside the city, and a home abroad in Thailand, as well as 3 elite foreign cars. Such a fortune was not his limit. Victor always wanted more. As a child, he and his family had lived poorly. Victor watched his parents struggle for him and his younger brother. He always sympathized with them, and then decided he would grow up and become the richest man in the world. Now, owning large companies, Victor had provided his parents with everything they needed. But recently, a terrible incident occurred. It was clear that a man this rich had many enemies. Victor had crossed paths with people in bids, received threats, and faced extortion, but he never succumbed to such provocations. Naturally, people didn't like that. Last year, another assassination attempt was made on Victor. He was shot in broad daylight. He was saved thanks to his own brother, who pushed Victor to the ground and shielded him with his body. Now, however, he had been in an accident. In the very center of the city, his car began to skid. Of course, the exact cause of the accident was not yet proven, but Victor knew for certain it was no accident. Most likely his enemies had disabled the brakes or caused some other malfunction. He would find out as soon as he got back on his feet. He lay there, unable to get up, lacking the strength even to call out. All he could do was wait for a doctor or nurse to arrive. But that very second, someone else entered the room, definitely not a medical worker. It was Charlotte, Victor's wife. They had met at a club the previous year. Charlotte was a model. Everything happened quickly between them, as often happens between a pretty model and a wealthy man. Victor couldn't forget this beautiful girl, so he married her. The only thing was, Victor never liked his wife's job. He felt that all men constantly ogled Charlotte. She always reassured him, emphasizing how much she loved him. And now, just as beautiful, she entered the patient's private room. He saw that Charlotte hadn't noticed Victor had regained consciousness. The girl was intensely talking to someone and even arguing. Victor couldn't clearly see the person's face. He was standing with his back to him, but it seemed to be the attending physician. Intrigued to hear what they were arguing about, Victor closed his eyes. "No, you explain this to me. How are the documents not yet processed? I am his legal wife, so I am entitled to all his property," Charlotte shouted. "Can you speak quieter?" the person whispered. "The whole hospital will hear. He's not dead yet, only in a coma. We can't simply redistribute the property of a living person. Besides, did you forget? He has a brother and parents. For now, we wait." Victor was stunned. So, while he was in a coma, his wife was dividing his assets and figuring out what to do with his money. He had always known his wife's stingy nature, but he never thought she was so greedy and hypocritical. "I suppose all models are like this," he thought. After this, the two decided to discuss everything outside, so they left the room, continuing their argument on a different topic. Left alone, Victor began to plan how to teach his wife a lesson and divorce her in a way that would leave her no claim to anything he owned. He lay with open eyes, staring at the ceiling. The post-coma state was taking its toll. Victor knew he should inform the doctors he had emerged from the coma, but he wasn't sure if that was the right decision. If his wife found out, she would find a way, and in case of divorce, half of all wealth accumulated during the marriage would go to her. That was at least half of the man's total assets. He urgently needed to transfer all his companies, firms, restaurants, and other holdings to someone else. Someone he could trust. Suddenly, a nurse burst into the room. Victor decided not to show her that he was out of the coma. The man closed his eyes and tried not to move. She approached him. "How strange," the girl mumbled to herself. "I need to call the doctor," she exclaimed, moving toward the exit. "Wait," Victor said sharply, causing the girl to jump and nearly scream. "Calm down. Please help me. What should you do after a coma? Just don't tell anyone. I will pay you well. I will explain later." The nurse proved to be surprisingly understanding. Either the millionaire's money had that effect on her, or she was simply a compassionate woman. Victor didn't know, but he wanted to. "Why didn't you call anyone?" he asked. "You could be fired." "It's very simple. Money plays a big role in our lives. By the way, we haven't agreed on how much you intend to pay me for my silence," said the nurse, adjusting the IV drip. "First, what is your name?" he asked with a smile. "My name is Eleanor." "So, about the price of silence," the girl insisted. "Will $20,000 suit you, Eleanor?" the man asked, emphasizing her unusual name. "You women are all sellout opportunists," Victor thought, remembering his wife. "You know what? I think the doctor should know his patient is healthy," Eleanor replied angrily, moving to leave the room. "Wait, fine. I'm sorry," Victor said. "I'm just in a difficult situation here." The man paused in thought. "You know, you could even help me. I'll pay you $50,000 up front if you help me pull off a certain task. I'll pay you the same amount at the end of the job." "And what is this task?" Eleanor asked with interest. Victor launched into a story about how his wife was trying to steal his property and explained the plan he had devised. The nurse was astonished. "How do you envision this? You want to stage a fake funeral?" Eleanor wondered. "That gives me more chances and more time. I will pay whoever needs to be paid. After my death, Charlotte won't rush the paperwork because she will think I'm dead. But she doesn't know that the seal of my company is required for processing the documents, and I always keep it with me. Find the locket with the seal in the things they brought me in and bring it to me." "All right, I'll do it. But to whom are you going to transfer the documents?" Eleanor asked, now using the informal "you." "I know this is a huge responsibility, so I'll transfer everything to my brother. He saved me once. He's the only one I can trust. You must bring him here, too." Eleanor was hesitant, but decided to help the millionaire, as she desperately needed the money. She knew Victor thought of her as a girl ready to kill for money, but that wasn't true. Eleanor's mother was sick with cancer, requiring a lot of money for treatment. An ordinary nurse could never earn such a sum. So, she had to agree to this deal with her new acquaintance. She resolved to go to the room where all the patient's belongings were kept, and took the locket with the seal out of the sealed bag. Next, she had to have a delicate conversation with Victor's brother, Ethan. Ellie didn't directly mention his recovery, only inviting him to the room. Ethan was overjoyed by his brother's recovery, but didn't understand why he wanted to keep it secret. Then Victor explained the whole plan to Ethan, and he agreed to help. Everything was arranged as planned. The millionaire's wife staged a scene of shock and disbelief. She even fainted in front of everyone. Victor didn't want his parents to know about his death, so he asked his brother to persuade Charlotte not to tell them. Charlotte agreed, understanding her own benefit in the situation. She wouldn't have to share the inheritance with her husband's mother. Victor was quietly discharged from the hospital after he had fully recovered. He had managed to bribe everyone necessary. Now he needed to focus on transferring his businesses to his brother. For peace of mind, Victor rented an apartment and settled there with Eleanor. He needed constant medical attention, as he often felt unwell, and he could only trust this girl. Ethan visited them twice a day, informing them of how the elaborate funeral had gone. So far, everything was going according to plan. On the first night in the new apartment, before bed, the patient felt unwell again. Victor called Eleanor for help. She administered the necessary medication. "You have a very light touch. I barely felt a thing," the millionaire said gratefully. "My mother is a doctor. I followed in her footsteps," she said, gathering all the supplies into the first aid kit. "You don't seem like someone who only cares about money." "Tell me the truth," Victor asked. He always saw right through people and knew in this case that Eleanor wasn't asking for money for a lavish life. "You are right," she replied with tears in her eyes. "My mother has a tumor in her lower abdomen. We've been treating it for a year and a half, but there have been no results. I sold our country house to raise money for an operation, but there was a medical error, and it failed. I urgently need money for a second surgery. Otherwise, I understand. If you want, I can give you the entire amount up front, even more than we agreed on. Where should I transfer it?" Eleanor didn't refuse, as her mother's life was the most important thing to her. That same evening, Ellie wanted to transfer the money immediately to the clinic where her mother was being treated, using an ATM. Victor decided to spend this time asleep, as the medication often made him drowsy. About 30 minutes passed. The door opened, but it wasn't Eleanor. The lock had been forced. A tall, strong man tried to walk quietly so as not to wake the person he intended to kill that night. Because Victor's sleep was very light, he immediately sensed the person's presence. He hadn't fully emerged from his sleep before a pillow was thrown over his face. The thug intended to smother the millionaire. Victor, however, remembered his self-defense lessons. He reacted quickly and turned his head to the side so the pillow didn't cut off his air as completely as it would have in a direct position. But Victor still felt the air growing scarcer. He searched for something to grab to strike his opponent, but found nothing. Unexpectedly, he felt the thug's grip loosen, and the man fell backward onto Victor. Pushing the body and the pillow off, the man saw a frightened Eleanor standing over him with a poker, apparently having just returned from the ATM. They stared at each other in shock, silent. Victor couldn't say anything. Eleanor could only utter, "Did I kill him?" The millionaire felt the pulse on the thug's neck and realized he was alive. Calling an ambulance and the police would have been reckless, as Victor was officially considered dead. "You didn't hit him too hard. There's no blood. I think he'll wake up soon. We need to leave," he said. "But where?" Eleanor asked cautiously. Going to her place was definitely out of the question, as the thugs now knew the nurse was in on the plan with the millionaire. "I have a garage outside the city. Not even my wife knows about it. Call a taxi," he said confidently. Upon arriving at the location, Eleanor was greatly surprised. She had imagined a garage completely differently, just an ordinary shack where all sorts of junk gathered dust. The millionaire's, however, looked entirely different, like a bunker. It even had a couch, a TV, and a refrigerator stocked with alcohol. As the nurse understood it, this was a complex of elite garages. "Do I understand correctly that there's no car here because you almost crashed it?" the girl asked with interest. Victor only nodded. How could he have forgotten about the garage? He began to recall how he had come here the day before to get his favorite car. "I honestly don't remember much that happened before the accident. Only now I remember being here that day. But I don't remember what I ate for breakfast, for example. I don't remember if I met with my wife that morning. I don't remember where I was going or why," the millionaire said sadly. "That's understandable. The head trauma definitely affected your memory," the girl noted. The two talked through the rest of the night, unable to sleep from the shock. Eleanor had never encountered such events before. Victor seemed to be showing her a new life. The millionaire himself had never met a girl like this nurse. The man had always been surrounded only by models ready to tear each other apart for his money. Eleanor wandered the garage out of boredom, examining the photos on the shelves. Suddenly, the girl noticed something sparkling on the floor. "Your wife dropped an earring here. How many carats is this?" the girl asked, picking up a beautiful gold earring with diamonds. Victor asked to look, and something struck him. And he remembered that day. He had been in a great mood. Well rested, the millionaire decided to go to work later. He went down to his wife's dressing room to say hello. Opening the door, he saw Charlotte sitting at the makeup vanity, kissing Ethan Victor's brother. He quickly rushed out of the house to the garage to get into his favorite car. Victor loved to speed to temper his anger and passion. Eleanor's voice brought him out of his memories. "What are you thinking about?" the girl asked kindly. "No one rigged that accident for me. I skidded because I love to speed when I'm angry. It means my wife is sleeping with your brother." Victor was cut off by Charlotte, who appeared suddenly out of nowhere. "Is that what you wanted to ask, darling?" "Well, yes, it is. Actually, we were planning on finishing you off, as you noticed today," Ethan interjected, having just entered. "But it didn't work out. Your little nurse turned out to be quite spry. But we'll finish this." Ethan pulled out a pistol and pointed it at Victor. Eleanor stood in shock. Only Victor was laughing at the absurdity of the situation. "Forgive me, but this is hilarious. Ethan, I didn't think you were that stupid." Victor laughed. "What did you say?" Ethan yelled. Victor realized that the man in the gown arguing with his wife at the hospital was his brother. "You've always been jealous of me. The feeling of envy has enveloped you, and you can't see the line. She is just using you, just as she used me. You just don't know any other way to trip me up, so you latched onto Charlotte. She will use you and then discard you. Look, if I die, all the property goes to her, and she won't need you. Step back, brother." "Will brother really kill brother?" Victor said, trying to appeal to Ethan. And it worked. The man lowered the pistol. He looked sadly at Victor. He truly had always been jealous and didn't realize what he was doing. During this time, Charlotte realized her plan had failed and quickly drove away. She hoped she could fly abroad. The girl had tried to foresee everything, but Victor had connections all over the city. His people quickly surrounded the city and caught his wife. To avoid getting bogged down in all the details of the case and its evidence, Victor paid the necessary people. Charlotte's guilt was proven. Victor was officially recognized as alive, for a considerable fee, of course. After some time, Victor and Eleanor married. The man helped the girl's mother and paid for all her remaining treatment and rehabilitation. The woman began to recover. Victor was never able to forgive his brother Ethan. They stopped communicating, and Ethan flew to another country. Victor now had a rule for life. He who betrays once will betray again.